End of the day. It's been a long day.
A long day.
So what's a schedule even like, right? Because you have people all around the world. So when do you work, I guess?
Yeah, I start my day at 8 o'clock mostly.
Yeah,
and that's
and that
to
works?
have some overlap with Europe.
Yeah, you get some people there. You got some people like in APAC or over there or in Australia or?
Yeah, we have them on 6 continents.
Okay.
So sometimes I recently did a special meeting just with the APAC people because I'm not in touch with them as much as with others.
Right. No, I used to have to do the same thing. It's really hard. You know, it's like really odd hours, but it's kind of crazy. So you start at 8, and I'm guessing it must run pretty long during the evenings too. But that's more kind of regular with startups, right? To kind of have to work like after dinner and do all these things.
Yeah. Well, ends around 6. Half of the time there's a business dinner. I tend to bring my wife to them, so it's
nice
that we do that together. And at night, sometimes I work, sometimes not.
At least you have office quietness, right? Because it's like, you know, we're in the global HQ of GitLab, and it's pretty nice and quiet here. It's pretty empty, and it's pretty small too. And I was really surprised. I guess I knew you guys were a remote company, right? In a very strict sense, right? Not remote friendly, but you know, almost remote only. And you know, it's kind of still very surprising to see like such a small and empty office, and kind of really put, I guess, your level of commitment to that in sharp contrast for me, because I was like, wow, they really mean it. Like they're not like trying to score points to hire employees. They really have like a fairly empty and small HQ. And so when did you even like create this kind of office and presence? Was it just for paperwork and documents, or what was the reason why you even set up this office?
So after we graduated from YCombinator, we thought we're going to hire salespeople here, and I knew that engineers were open to remote work, but it didn't work for sales organizations.
Right.
So we got this place. I thought it would last us about half a year, but then the salespeople came, and they came a few times, and then they stopped coming. They started working from home. They didn't like the 2-hour commute from Alameda to San Francisco.
Right.
So then I was like, okay, am I gonna force them to come, or am I gonna say results matter? And I said, I care about the results, and they made their quota, so it was fine.
And it's great. I mean, I see more and more of those kind of satellite sales offices now. It's kind of interesting where people like go and get some a cheap office like in Denver or in Arizona, and then, you know, kind of hire salespeople there. So even if you don't have like working from home type of salespeople, you know, the idea of having them in HQ is kind of falling out of favor a little bit, especially in the Bay Area where like rent prices and all that and commuting is so complicated. So yeah, it's interesting. Now everybody's remote. It's not just technical people. It's like business and everything else tend to be more disconnected.
And it's not like that we hire working from home people. Most of the salespeople we hired worked at an office before.
Right.
So it's just, if you give them the choice, most will say, I want to be able to travel without taking vacation. I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my partner or my family.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a big transition, I think, overall. Like, you know, let's go outside, maybe like have some better light. But it's kind of like we're in this shift where I remember like just a few years ago, you know, finding remote-friendly jobs as a developer was like, you know, you were like, oh, I'm pretty happy. Like, you know, they're letting me like do a day from home, a week or something like that. To now, I think you find a lot of companies very willing to hire people, at least some people that are fully remote, on top of having remote days. To now, non-technical positions, you know, support positions even, being partially or fully remote. And there's been kind of a gradual shift over the past kind of 5-10 years, it seems like. But so how did you get to that kind of conclusion for GitLab? Was it something you always figured was in the blueprint, or something you had learned from a previous experience? Like, how did you decide to make GitLab a remote company?
So it started remote because Dimitri was in the Ukraine, I was in the Netherlands. The open source community around GitLab was remote. So that was the default. And when we hired people, I had an extra desk at home, so people came in, but they quickly stopped coming. Right. So you can add more desks to the office, but people are voting with their feet. They rather stay at home if you don't make them come. So another point was when we graduated from YCombinator, just told you. And the last point was when we hired our first BDR team. Those are mostly people at the beginning of their careers. Right. And our sales management wasn't sure whether that would work. Would these people be motivated? Do they need like the energy of a group setting? And they do need the energy of a group, but they don't need to be in an office. And I think we learned it, and at some point we said, this is actually better.
Right.
This allows us to scale better. It allows us to get great people, because people are looking for remote jobs. It's not, the companies aren't offering them. So we get to hire better people. And because everyone's remote, everyone's on the same level. There's not you're not missing out by not being at the head office.
And that's a very important point, actually, like that disconnect sometimes there is between people that are remote and like office life, and I want to get back to that, but let's talk more about kind of some of the reasons why remote is actually a positive. And so you mentioned, hiring people, better people that maybe are looking for more flexibility in their working schedule or their working accommodation or shorter commutes. But I've also heard this argument made for like, hey, maybe there's great developers or salespeople in like Arizona or Australia, whatever, and your HQ is probably not there if you're the average startup, and so you get to tap into like that talent that you would never be able to hire, if you force them locally. But have you seen other advantages, in terms of productivity, effectiveness, happiness? What are some of the reasons you feel like a remote culture can be like superior?
Yeah, I think people are more effective. You have a lot more, a higher ability to plan your day and not get interrupted. Mm-hmm. And it goes for everyone, not only engineers, but also like marketing people. Everyone at the company feels that they're being more effective and that they save a lot of time because of that. It's not so easy. Like if you plan a meeting, it's not like you round up by walking by some desk. It's not a spur of the moment. So tend to have less meetings as a company, and more stuff is written down, which makes people more effective. They don't have to go around asking. Everything's written down. And people can balance it with their lives. They can go to the gym during the day when there's nobody there. They can do their groceries when they feel like it. Like many times, if you work hard for a couple of hours, you sometimes need a break. Right. And right now that feels weird to go out the office at 3 o'clock and return at 4. Like no one does that. Right. If you're by yourself at home, that's okay. Yeah,
the effectiveness is interesting because I think a lot of people assume, and it's true that you can be terribly ineffective as a remote worker, right? Sure. It is a bit of a personal thing too. Some people, will do great, some people will do the same, and some people will do horribly without kind of the framework and the control. I've noticed of like an office and regular hours, and that just kind of comes down to personality, psychology, maybe, but. It is amazing how much more effective, some people at least can be, or some companies can be, because you think about people wasting time at home and errands, and maybe there's kids around or something like that. But you waste so much time in an office to just kind of like hanging in a cafeteria or like running into people and getting dragged into like an impromptu meeting and just commuting and everything else. That people tend to. Only see kind of the way you can lose time at home, but they don't really necessarily notice the way you can lose time at the office.
If you waste time at the office, it's kind of legitimate, and it's still a waste of time. So the only thing we try to do is make sure that people have time for chit chat without feeling bad about it. Mm-hmm. So we have a concept of virtual coffee breaks. Mm-hmm. So you schedule a coffee break with someone, one-on-one, a person you like or want to get to know better, and it's half an hour. It's okay not to talk about work. And you don't have to feel bad about it. We make everyone that joins the company do at least 10 so that they get a taste of that. Because people are super effective at home, and you want to also facilitate like feeling part of a group. So,
and it seems like that would kind of link back to that thing you were saying before about not having the stigma of office life versus remote, and also about bringing some of that natural culture, right? Not for lack of a better word, that you create in having an office and having people getting to know each other through non-work interactions, right? So those are maybe some of the challenges, some of like two biggest challenges I've seen in companies that are like partially remote or mostly remote, and they're definitely kind of worth dealing with. And so maybe we can go into a bit more detail about them. Obviously, one of the first things you lose with a remote culture is a sense of knowing people, because you only know them through Slack or email, and that tends to be a very different personality, right, than the personality you have in real life. I think we all do this to some extent, where we express ourselves via text or via written text in a different way than we behave. You don't have all the clues of behaving in person.
We put a lot of thought and effort in that. So apart from the virtual coffee break, we have a team meeting every day. It's half an hour. And more than half of that time is spent with people talking about what they did in the weekend. Mm-hmm. So it's personal. So you get to see every one of our 100 people, you get to see what they did. or you hear what they did and they share their stories. Of course, a lot of discourse is happening like in chat channels as well, which is great. And then 2 times a year we bring everyone together, fly them to one location and spend a week together, mostly focused on like fun and non-work activities.
And that can be very expensive, but because you have to factor that into the cost of running the company in a remote kind of way. The culture bit is interesting, like those personal interaction, because I've seen that really catch up with you so quickly where, people just kind of drift, and they take like, let's say microaggressions or like emails that didn't like read the same way you intended them or vice versa. And that kind of tension really builds up. And if you don't have a sense of like the other person and who they are as a human being, like I find that that's one of the hard things to negotiate. So building in that personal time seems like a really efficient way to deal with it.
So far it's been going great, and everyone after their first week says, your people are so nice, like that's amazing. And they kind of adjust and become nice themselves too. Kindness is one of our values. We totally encourage people, if you have a couple of interactions on email or chat, go hop on a video call, turn on your video camera, get that non-verbal language going as well. But it also, like, what tone do you set at the company as management, and what do you encourage? And I think that's going really well so far.
And kindness is a bit overblown, but I want to stress for people like how important it is in the context of remote culture, because you think about most workplace communication, they're about being effective. They're about like, you condense information, you say like, I need this meeting or I need this thing done, and you think about efficiency a lot of time. And that efficiency with what can be very, very grating when you don't know the person. So if you spend a bit of extra time to kind of add flourish, add personality, add humor and kindness to your emails, to your Slack messages, to whatever communication you have, I kind of feel like that's one of the key things. It's focusing less on the efficiency and more on the kindness, and that's really critical.
It's hard because it's not just North American people. So it's hard to do it verbally, and like directness and being succinct is also part of our company culture. But we do encourage like using emojis liberally. Mm-hmm. We have a thank you channel where like day in, day out, you see people being thanked. Mm-hmm. We have a bonus and people get it for going like, for doing something they weren't asked. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's just focusing on that from the top. Right. Like it's very good to be like direct, mm-hmm. but kind, and that combination, getting that right, so people able to give feedback and people able to take feedback about their work, but being very kind for the person and very understanding. And I think that's a tone you set also as senior management.
Right. And there's definitely, I think, a lot of linked issues. So, you briefly mentioned kind of multiculturalism, right? The fact that you're going to naturally deal with people coming from very different backgrounds, even within North America, to be honest. And that's not really a remote problem per se, but it tends to be exacerbated by a remote company where you hire a lot of people in a lot of different places. And so I completely agree it's something people need to have on their radar, even more so than the average company. But the other thing we mentioned was that difference between remote people and non-remote people. And I think, that's such a strong thing to kind of keep an eye on if you're doing a partially remote culture, because very quickly, like, you'll have this kind of clique feeling that develops within an office.
Doing it hybrid, on-premise, remote is super hard. So that's why we avoided that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's a good word of wisdom. And there's a ton of really great stuff you put on the manifesto, the remote manifesto you published like last year, and it was kind of different things you found in different rules. So I think it's really a great place to get started. And it's really definitely amazing to see a company grow as well as GitLab, doing the remote.
Yeah, it's been great, because we were March last year, we were 9 people. Now we're over 100, and we didn't have to move offices. So otherwise we would have had to move like 3 times. So it's really been a great time saver.
Cool. Thank you so much, and congrats on everything.
Thank you, Tim.
It's a hornet's nest. There are a lot of issues, but the one that I think is one of the more easily fixable ones, and one of the ones that I've kind of noticed, is that there are a lot of companies that are taking their cues from some of the bigger players. So you look at how Google hires, or you look at how Facebook hires, right? And it almost becomes this cargo cult, where there are a ton of smaller companies that don't need to have process at that scale, but just blindly copy what these companies are doing. And they'll blindly copy the criteria that these companies use to even figure out who they're going to let in the door, as well as their interview process and a lot of other things that they don't necessarily need. So what ends up happening is you have all these people that are really, really great engineers, but didn't end up going to MIT or Stanford or have worked at Google, Facebook, or a particularly prominent YCombinator company. But they're never even going to be able to get in the door. So you have this long tail of people that are just as good.